The grass breathes like a sleeping beast beneath a sky split by dying light. And in the stillness between one breath and the next, something ancient stirs, not with sound, but with memory. Not with motion, but with the absence of it, the kind that lives in bones long after the moment has passed. She moves barely visible through the dusk, a shadow limping against the edge of the world, ribs sharp beneath torn fur, her eyes not looking for safety, but holding on to something deeper, something lost long ago and not meant to return. A cub whimpers behind her small broken breath, a sound that doesn't cry out, but sinks straight into the earth, and somewhere miles away in a ranger's cabin, a radio crackles with static, and a voice says Leopard injured near the bend. And just like that, something opens that was shut for years. He doesn't speak, doesn't think, just moves boots pounding against the dirt, heartbeat louder than the wind, and the past rushes in like water through cracked stone. The image of a creature, not tamed, not touched, but remembered her golden gaze, the way she once looked at him across a gulf of silence, and he knew even then she would never stay yet. He watched her vanish year after year, hoping, needing some sign that the bond wasn't a dream now. The sign is blood in the dust and a trail of broken grass. And as he sees her again, everything collapses. Distance time, silence. Nothing matters. The leopard doesn't run. She doesn't growl. She only looks. And in that look, the years rewind, the ache returns. The meaning floods back into the hollow spaces of his life. Because what kind of love survives in silence? What kind of memory refuses to die? He takes a step, and she doesn't move. She knows him not by name, not by reason, but because some threads are not made of logic. They are made of pain and waiting, and the echo of breathless watching. And now, with the sun falling and the cub barely breathing, they stand there. Two figures carved from different worlds, bound by something unspoken, something that still burns under the ash, and in that moment neither of them is lost anymore. Dust hangs in the air like memory clinging to the breathless edge of evening. And Eli moves through his routine with the slow precision of someone who has stopped expecting anything to change. He checks the perimeter, walks the fence that guards the park's heart from what waits outside, counts the water drums, notes the wind direction, and watches the sky as if expecting it to speak, but it never does. And when he returns to his cabin, the light is always the same, faded gold slipping through the shutter slats across the table where he always sets one extra cup, never used, just there, like habit or hope or both. No one asks about it, not anymore. His colleagues learn to stop asking questions when the answers come wrapped in silence. He eats alone, listens to the calls of distant animals, maps their routes not for duty but for something closer to longing. He still keeps the notebook from 5 years ago worn at the edges, filled with hand-drawn sketches of paw prints, notes on patterns, movements, territories, and one name written more than any other, Ashira. He doesn't need to look at it. To remember, she moved like smoke across the valley. Her eyes caught light, like flint, and there was a stillness to her that mirrored something buried in him. They had never touched, never crossed the line between watcher and watched. But in her gaze he had once felt seen in a way that made the world less hollow after she disappeared. He told himself it was nature. It was the cycle. It was fate. But some nights when the power flickers and the savannah hushes to listen, he thinks maybe he could have done more, and so he walks the old routes not marked on the map, the ones where he used to spot her, just out of reach, just close enough to imagine a wordless understanding. He leaves meat sometimes at the edge of the trees, though he tells no one and pretends it's for the hyenas. He sharpens his knife, not because he needs it, but because it feels like control. He listens to the wind and still hears the crack of dry twigs, and waits. Waits without knowing for what, but with a patience carved by absence, his radio stays on, even when he sleeps, tuned low to static like a heartbeat. Because what if one day something comes through? What if there's a voice or a signal or a sound that finally breaks the stillness, and out there far beyond his cabin, where the grass sighs under every step, a leopard limps through twilight, not old, but not young, marked by years and hunger and loss. She no longer seeks comfort or safety. She only moves forward, led by instinct and something more fragile. The echo of a scent. The memory of a shape standing quietly at the edge of her world. Something she once trusted without reason. She passes by old dens now empty, by bones now bleached by the sun, and every place whispers of something. She cannot name a shadow, a presence, a moment that never left. And so the days pass one after another, silent, resigned, but not quite dead in the way of things that wait to be remembered. Both man and beast, carrying on in separate silences, tethered by something they can't explain, a thread stretched thin but unbroken, not yet. It happened without warning and without sound, as most real endings do. One day she was there, a golden figure slipping through the tall grass, a flicker at the edge of his vision. And the next, she was gone, and the world didn't notice it kept spinning, under the same sun. But for Eli, something fundamental had shifted, like a breath caught in the throat that never came back out the last time he'd seen her. She'd stood still just beyond the ridge, barely visible through the shimmer of heat their eyes had, met, not with drama or farewell, but with a strange stillness, as if both of them sensed something about to fall apart, but didn't know how to stop it. And then the sighting stopped. No more paw prints in the dust, no distant rustle in the undergrowth that held her weight, no gold in the grass where she used to pass. He waited at first because waiting felt better than accepting every dusk. He sat outside the cabin, eyes scanning the ridge where she once watched him, a thermos in one hand, his rifle untouched. Beside him, because he never needed it, with her, dusk became silence. Silence became habit. Habit became mourning, the kind you can't explain to anyone, not without sounding mad. Because how do you mourn a wild animal? A creature never yours, never spoken to, never held, but somehow part of you. Anyway, he filed the reports, followed every poacher trail that reached too far into the reserve, checked the camera traps, prayed over blurred shadows. But nothing. Nothing. And as weeks folded into months, and months into the second year, he changed. He didn't smile as much, didn't speak unless necessary, stopped attending the briefings that asked for too much presence. He moved through the park like a ghost, still diligent, but hollow, and in the quiet moments at night when the animals had gone still and the radio was just a low hum, he let himself feel it. Not just the loss, but the failure, like maybe he should have known. Maybe he should have followed that last look down into the valley just once. Maybe he could have stopped it, but there was nothing to stop and nothing left to save. And somewhere far from where he watched and waited, Ashira too was learning what it meant to lose something that never had a name. Her world had turned sharper, colder, her mate, killed not long after the last season, her cubs taken in the night by those who didn't care for lineage or life. And she ran for weeks until her paws bled, until the trees blurred, until she forgot what she was running from, only that there was no more safety, nowhere she could rest, without twitching at every sound, and she stopped purring. Even to herself, she stopped calling out, even when hunger grew too loud, because no one would answer, and nothing ever did. And in her eyes, the light dimmed not from age, but from the slow erosion of trust, the memory of the man on the ridge. The strange human who never chased her, never shouted, who simply watched. She buried that too deep in the marrow, where memory goes to die. And so they lived apart, she among shadows and shifting winds, he beneath a roof that never felt like shelter. Both half alive, still breathing, still waking but untouched by joy, marked by an absence that had no body and no grave, and every day that silence stretched further until it became the only thing they could rely on. Something steady, something unchanging. A quiet that settled into their bones and whispered, "This is how it will be now. This is all that's left." Let me take a moment here. Share with me in the comments where you're listening from. Have you ever experienced a bond, whether with a person or an animal, that lasted through years of silence and distance? If stories like this touch your heart, please subscribe. There's so much more soulful moments ahead. It started like any other late afternoon, the heat slipping into something cooler, the sky beginning to bruise purple at the edges, and Eli half listening to the usual radio chatter. One ranger checking a fence, another reporting a herd citing nothing unusual, until a voice crackled in soft and strained like it was pushing through a storm and said the words that stopped time in his chest. Leopard sighted near river bend. Looks injured, might be dragging something. Can't confirm. Eli didn't move at first. Didn't breathe, his hand frozen mid-reach, and the sound of that voice hung in the air, heavier than it had any right to be, the silence after it deafening. And in that silence, something ancient cracked open inside him. A memory, not of a moment, but of many. Her shadow crossing the grass. The low hum in his chest, every time he spotted her from afar. The stillness between them that felt louder than speech. He stood up slowly, as if trying not to scare something away. Heart already racing ahead of his thoughts. Logic tried to pull him back. It could be any leopard. The bend was far, maybe too far. Maybe he was just holding on to a ghost, but his body had already made the decision before his mind caught up. He grabbed his gear, didn't speak to anyone, didn't explain, and as he drove the old road west, every branch, every turn looked touched by memory. The deeper he went, the more the landscape pressed in, as if holding its breath. And then he saw the trail, broken grass, blood in the dust. A shape ahead, low moving, wrong, and he stopped cold because there she was, not just a leopard, but her ribs too sharp, her coat dulled by time and suffering. And still there was something unmistakable, something burned into him like a forgotten language. And beside her a cub too, small too, still barely breathing, caught in the cruel jaws of rusted steel, and a shearer trying to drag it with a body that had almost nothing left. And still she pulled, she fought, and when she lifted her head and their eyes met, it was as if the years collapsed into that one impossible instant, and the part of him that had gone quiet roared back to life because she looked at him, not as a stranger, not with fear, but with something else, something that held the edges of memory and trust and pain and hope. All at once, he didn't move yet, afraid to break the spell, afraid it wasn't real, but she didn't run. She didn't snarl, and something in him cracked wide open, because maybe she remembered, and that was enough to tear through every wall he'd built around the years of silence and regret. He stepped forward slowly, no sudden movements, no sound, and the doubt inside him screamed, what if she doesn't know you anymore? What if you're nothing to her now? What if all of it was just in your head? But then she didn't turn away. She didn't bare her teeth, and the world narrowed to that moment. The trap, the cub, the gaze between them, and in it all was the decision. Not just to help, but to believe. To believe that some bonds do not dissolve, even in the longest silence, that something lost is not always gone. And so he knelt in the dust and reached out not just to the cub, but to the past, to the chance that maybe love had waited in the dusk just long enough to be found again. Eli's boots stirred the dry earth softly as he inched closer, the sun dipping low behind the acacia trees, casting long shadows over the cracked soil. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Easy, it's me. The words trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. She paused, the motion in her body so slight it might have been the settling of her breath or the faint flick of her tail. But it was enough to pull him still as the wind held its breath. The air between them thick with the weight of years lost and pain unspoken. Her eyes slowly lifted, meeting his with a depth that reached beyond recognition, beyond memory. It was as if something inside them flickered, a fragile spark, a long dormant ember reigniting. In the silence that followed, he saw the worn lines of her face, the dull gleam of scars, old and new, and beneath that, a steady, fierce glow that spoke of survival and motherhood, and something softer, something that used to be trust. His heart pounded loud in his ears, drowning out all else. And yet, the world felt quieter than ever, as if everything waited for the next breath. The slightest movement, her gaze held him captive, and in that endless moment, the distance of years vanished. She did not pull away, nor did she tense, only let her eyes linger on his, as if searching for a name or a scent or a touch remembered not from skin but from soul. He reached out slowly, careful not to startle her fingers, trembling with the weight of the moment. The scent of earth and dry grass mingled with something faintly familiar, a ghost of sweat and firelight from long ago. And then he touched her cub, lifting the fragile bundle with reverence, not as a savior, but as someone returning home. The leopard watched silent and still, not a growl, not a hiss, just a soft exhale that seemed almost like a sigh, a quiet acceptance passing between them, a bridge spanning years of silence and suffering. The sky darkened above them, stars blinking awake, like distant witnesses to a reunion. No words could capture a silent pact, formed in the fading light that some bonds transcend time and pain. As Eli carried the cub towards safety, Ashira followed a few steps behind, steady and sure, not a captive, but a companion, and in the lingering hush, the unspoken promise hung between them that this was not an end, but a beginning, a shared path forward, written in the language of glances, pauses, and the quiet music of hearts recognizing each other again. Days fold softly into nights, and Eli's hands, once tense with worry, begin to steady as he tends the fragile cub. Her breaths shallow but growing stronger beneath his careful touch. Ashira lingers near the edge of the clearing, her amber eyes never, leaving the small figure slowly reclaiming life from the edge of death. She moves with a cautious grace, no longer just a shadow slipping through the grass, but a guardian, watching over what remains of her family. Eli feels the weight of years lift bit by bit, each small sign of recovery from the cub, a twitch of a paw, a blink that lasts longer than before, sparks a flicker of hope inside him, and in those moments the silence between them softens his voice, no longer just a whisper, but a quiet reassurance as he talks to her, not demanding trust, but offering it freely. Ashira answers with subtle gestures, a tilt of the head, a slow blink, the brush of her tail against the dirt as if reminding him. They remember they never truly lost what was. There all along the cub begins to explore its world, stumbling at first, then with growing confidence, and Eli watches the tentative playfulness with something like awe, because in those moments he sees reflected the healing of wounds deeper than flesh, old griefs and doubts that once held him captive, now unraveling like the first fragile green shoots after a long winter. Ashira's presence, steady and unyielding, becomes a balm, not only for her cub, but for Eli's restless spirit. And as the days stretch into weeks, a quiet routine settles like a prayer unspoken, but felt deeply in the way he watches her pause on the ridge. At sunset, her silhouette etched in gold and purple against the fading light. A silent promise held between two worlds not quite the same, but forever linked. The wind carries the scent of earth and healing, and in that scent lies a truth. Eli no longer needs to say aloud that some connections are beyond words, beyond time, beyond the scars left by absence. They live in the spaces between breaths, in the gentle brush of fur against skin, in the unwavering gaze that says, "I remember, and here I am." And in that remembered presence, life finds a way back from the edge, and love quietly roots itself beneath the same sky. Two beings, once lost, now found in the soft, steady light of belonging. Some bonds need no words. They pass through silence, distance, and time like a quiet river flowing beneath the surface, because true connection never fades. It waits patiently, hidden beneath years of absence and pain, ready to return when the moment is right, to heal what once felt broken and bring life back to what seemed lost forever.